Hello, Sherlock here with Elementary Airsoft, and today we'll be taking a look at the Gate PTX Pistol. This is going to be a little bit different than your average or standard review. We'll be diving a lot more into some of the technical functions of it and some of the troubleshooting. This gun hasn't had the smoothest of launches, so we'll be covering some of those, more so of the technical details, but we will start out with a traditional sort of initial overview and initial thoughts. Gun comes packaged nicely in a hard case. It's not super cheap, but it isn't super nice like a Pelican or even a Pelican knockoff either. Nothing wrong there, nothing to complain about. It is well protected with foam, and then the lower we have this thick closed cell foam that's been, looks like it's been laser cut. Pistol just sits in that cutout, and then we also have the one mag it comes with from the factory was in here. I will note too that how this looks, I feel like if you put in multiple mags, they would start squeezing each other in with the foam, and they only fit the standard size mags, not the extended mags. Underneath the foam, you will find manual, patch, spare O-rings for all the parts of the engine itself, the reflective sticker for the trigger and the Aster unit, which that's inside of it, Allen key for adjusting Hopup and trigger, manual or quick start guide. It does contain a QR code to the current updated manual that's a PDF on the website, and then just their chrono test feedback. Get this out of the way. So just quick talk about the gun itself. Before we start going into anything too technical, the gun, everything you see here is made out of a CNC machined aluminum that's then been anodized. The finish on all of this is, I would say, excellent. I will admit on the trigger, on the guard here, if I get it in the right angle, you can kind of see the stepping from, it's locked in when the CNC mill, and you're basically stepping down to get these smooth curves. It's more visibly noticeable slightly at an angle. Feel-wise, it feels fine, or if anything, it might add a slight amount of texture and or grip. This is the olive color. I feel like the pictures and even the video may not do it very much justice. The original website images and or renderings seem to indicate that it would be darker. So the first couple of pictures that I've seen of other people's who'd gotten the green, I was a little bit worried that it seemed very light or muted. I'll say in person, it doesn't look bad. It looks pretty good. Sort of that Halo two-tone vibe is kind of what comes to mind for me. Your selector is here on this side. All the way forward is safe. If we push it back one click, that's going to be your auto, and you can see just a tiny bit of red dot poking out there. All the way back is semi, and that becomes fully revealed. The selector is a little bit awkward to reach. Like I have to kick the gun out in order to reach it with my thumb. I will admit that I like the default setup. That semi is all the way back, because that's the easiest one to default to, rather than an in-between setting. Iron sights are a little bit interesting. We'll talk about those a little bit later. So the back here, they are solid. They are dimpled, so you could potentially go in there with an epoxy. And the front sight is drilled out, but there's no opening in the top. So it's like you could put a fiber sight in there, but it wouldn't capture much of the light because it doesn't have as much surface area to catch the light. Up top here in the middle, you will find the grub screw adjustment for your Hopup. Up front, there's this other grub screw, or looks like M3 hole. That I have no clue what it's for. And in the back, we have another 3 screw holes. Once again, too, I'm less certain what this middle one is for. Potentially other future accessories, but the back 2, you see this is for their armor adapter plate. Picatinny rail on the bottom. And that's about it. And the one thing that you may notice too, that the back of the gun that sticks out over your hand, this comes back a bit further. This is a limitation that they ran into because of just how the HPA engine is laid out, and the solenoid sticks out the back. So you will have it coming back over your hand a little bit. It isn't that aggressive. All right. So initial thoughts and performance out of the box. This is really well made. It seems to take a lot of air or air pressure to get like even a joule of energy out of it. So all my testing was done with 0.28s, in part because I'm a cheapskate and it's what I have the most of. Until I got things happy with that, I didn't mess with anything heavier. And I think currently, or out of the box, this gun does not perform up to snuff. And I'll just get that out there right away. I would not recommend this in its current state, especially for its price point. I did purchase this with all my own money. I was an early adopter or early pre-order, and I got some additional cashback madness going on with a PayPal promotion at the time. Probably in part the only reason I ended up getting this. It is a really interesting or cool concept. It is a ground up, from manufacturer built, HPA powered pistol. It's not an adapter, it's nothing else. It's a straight up engine in there. The engine and the block are integrated. We'll take a look at that in a second. In theory, on paper, this would have all the hallmarks of a really epic pistol. Right, it has mags, so the short mags I think are 80, and then these are 120, the longer ones. So it's like you have a large-ish capacity in a mag that's still, inserted. It isn't that long, but you have a pretty good size capacity. You have the abilities of programming the trigger, the ECU, all that jazz. In theory, good reliability that you can achieve with HPA, and really it should, on paper, be able to perform exceedingly well. I would say on par with like an out-of-box AEG of a higher quality. At least that was my hope or thoughts. To cut to the chase, or to spare you any pain, it doesn't. Out of the box, its groupings are terrible. Its air efficiencies are pretty bad. For reference, I have to put it at about 110 psi to get about 1 joule performance out of it. Now, some of that is going to vary, engine design to engine design, but the performance as it came, not great. And I will say that too. I've been harping on that a lot. They are working on it. They have made a whole bunch of changes, and they're working on a Gen 2 or an upgrade kit to take and fix all the problems with these. My personal opinion is they should have stopped or spent the extra 6 months in development and actually testing stuff before releasing a product. You'd upset some people, sure, but they're getting a product that actually behaves as sort of advertised or as you'd expect for a gun that's this expensive would have been worth it, in my opinion. And or it's going to save them money because you don't have to go back and forth and produce a whole separate set of parts and send it out. If you're that concerned too, have a beta testers group. Work with 12, 20 people, high skilled techs and whatever, who can provide some of that feedback to you. That said, compared to other manufacturing stuff, they've been very active on their Discord, talking about it, engaging with the community, addressing feedback, QC issues. Even sending out other units and stuff. I would say they're doing really well. And like I said, I feel like this has a ton of potential. I think it's just a little bit too early, and it's not there yet. It also has great potential for future expansion. And some of the stuff they talked about before, integrated tracers, like a little display that would go on this back here, show you like round counts or other stuff, USB charging, all that jazz. Some really good potential there and room to grow and expand as a platform. And it's that bit that in particularly excited me to start with. All right, step off the soapbox now talking about it. Now let's go into some of the details of why it's misbehaving, so to speak. So let's go ahead and take the gun down. All you have to do is pull out the little front pin, and you are able to, you want to make sure that your Hopup is all the way adjusted off or here. I took my screw almost up to the surface, and you can slide the outer barrel, really this, I don't know, 1-inch block at the front, and rear here off. This reveals our internals, and here we can kind of see or get a good view of the engine, the barrel, our battery. So they really have crammed sort of a lot in here. So you can see this section here, right, which is approximately, let's see if I have something with English and metric on it. Probably not. But, right. So realistically, the engine portion of this is like 1.75 inches long. That's the cylindrical engine body. So that's quite small. And then, you know, we have the little bit of the solenoid sticking out back here. Which if I the right size Allen key, we can also pull this off, which you'll need to do anyhow to talk to you more about it. Right, so this is just a little cap that covers the back of your solenoid and lets us have the connections and wires back here. So it's a single solenoid engine, and in its current config, so the config that I had, the early adopter, mine's got delivered in start of this month, so start of March. This is still using the spring-driven nozzle, which I wasn't expecting. So in the engine, the nozzle is driven forward with spring. It is a open bolt engine, meaning that when there's air connected to the system, the nozzle is pulled in a rearward position. When the solenoid trips, nozzle goes forward via spring and then releases the air. What I think is so great about the spring-driven nozzles are, just from past experience as a tech and working with different HPA systems, specifically a lot with R-hopped barrels, and really trying to get the absolute most accuracy out of systems as you can. When you have an HPA system, right, you're connected to an air source, and if that nozzle is driven forward pneumatically, that forward velocity or the forward chamber pressure applied by that nozzle is going to vary with the PSI coming into your system. So, right, if I'm operating an engine at 90 PSI versus at 120 PSI, that nozzle is going to have a different amount of force, right? Because there's 30 more pounds per square inch being applied to the diameter of the nozzle to push it forward. Meaning that BB goes into the hop-up unit with a lot different varying forces. That's what's so great about a spring. A spring gives you a constant chamber force, which on paper I'm like, that's awesome. Great. I love it once I've found out that. I didn't know that before I got the gun. If I did, I'd be even more excited. Now the barrel here, we use a gas blowback cut barrel with a VSR type bucking or gas blowback type bucking. Now, keynote here too that I'll talk about quick is barrel cut. So this is the stock barrel. The barrel it comes with is a Lambda 5 or 6.05 millimeter barrel. What I haven't, this should be their micron class barrel. I'll admit mine in particular, if I pull off the bucking, and I've seen other people's, the interior finish, at least within the window, is pretty poor. The bore finish seems about on par. So these are just different pistol barrels that I have also from Lambda. So here's our 605 that came with it. It's important to note, if you're getting a third-party or aftermarket barrel, the index position of the C-clip. So I believe this is the VSR style cut, where the C-clip sits right next to your bucking groove, and then we have our standard gas blowback cut, where it's a little bit off. So this is a Mark 23 SOCOM cut barrel, so this would not work. This is a high Kappa barrel, and this would work because of the clip's positioning. So if you're shopping for an aftermarket barrel or trying to do something carbine or make one longer, make sure you're getting the right type of barrel. Okay. That said, my concerns around the QC in the barrel, I don't really blame Gate for this. I would more put it on Lambda. I mean, I've handled literal hundreds of Lambda barrels, lapping and R-hopping them. I've never really seen quality like this, which slightly concerning, but it could be too just how they mill and clean out this opening. This is the bucking they ship with. I'll talk about that more in a second. Just put this back together. But to go back to the accuracy statement, sorry, I got a little bit distracted there, is spring-driven nozzle going into a VSR type bucking. And at initial onset, you might think, wow, that's great. What's so great about a VSR bucking? And why are they used like in sniper rifles a lot? It's because when your nozzle comes and chambers the round in, it has a much larger area that it's going to be sealing to and with. On paper, you think about that, awesome. Less chance of blowout, less air leaks, more efficiency, more consistency. Consistency is key in accuracy. Cool. So we have a whole bunch of pieces here. On paper, awesome. They seem great. But it's not shooting great. So what's going on? And let me grab one bucking quick. Apologies, I should have prepared a bit more. But we have particularly, this is the barrel and bucking it ships with. I don't remember off the top of my head. I might edit in post. Right? Your BB comes and it's going to get chambered or pushed in. So the keynote here, I'd say, is when we're pushing our BB in to the barrel, there is absolutely no resistance feeding the BB into a chamber. There's nothing. It's barely a whisper of a tap, and it's in. Nothing slowing it down or anything. So what does that mean? That means we're dependent on your Hopup arm, which is sort of a TDC style, which is excellent in theory for consistency, right? That's going to be pushing down on it a little bit. So when you go and chamber your BB, it's now going to get caught by your mound, right? And backspin will get applied as it comes out. However, in this particular case, what is happening is how the BB gets placed into this bucking or into the barrel is inconsistent, right? So think about it. It is laterally landing at different depths within our bucking. So like chamber 1 might be there and chamber 2 could be like here in relation to it. What does that mean? That means it's going to start partway under the mound or varying amounts under the bucking mound. And what does that mean? There's a different length of the bucking mound to apply backspin, meaning different amounts of backspin, meaning you have vertical variance from shot to shot. Well, shoot, that kind of sucks. Where does that come from? So, a couple of things. One is the nature of open barrels for gas blowback buckings, right? So, in our open barrel setup here, if we watch, I'm going to just use my finger and depress even right near like the top of here, not even near the end of the barrel. So if I'm going to deflect that bucking mount some, what also happens is we start deflecting back here, right? So that's going to add some weird play between the BB, the nozzle, as it chambers in here. So that means you're going to have some weird variance potentially depending on person to person, energy to energy, set with your thing, set with your HBA tank, how many PSI you're running. That's going to vary how much pressure you need to apply, and that's going to cause variances in basically how much this front end squishes, and that will interfere potentially with the nozzle. That will also potentially touch the BB, and will change the amount or the position by the combination of those two things, where the BB ends up under the bucking mount, and thereby how much backspin it gets. So I had produced the barrel that's in here currently. I made a bridged barrel, and unfortunately, due to the positioning of our Hopup arm, which I didn't have the sense to check first, this Hopup arm is positioned in relation to the barrel when it's locked in right here. So the Hopup arm, is it centered on the barrel window? No. It's aligned perfectly to the edge. And I'm guessing that might have been originally to try and help improve consistency, basically by moving the point where the bucking starts deflecting further back, so hopefully the BB gets caught or slowed down sooner, which would in theory help it some. But that rules out your ability to use a bridged barrel or something over the back, and the theory there being, if we have something over the back lip of the barrel here, right, when you're deflecting your mound, it's not going to squish our feed lip area of the bucking at all. So that was one of my theories. The other is, being an accuracy enthusiast, RHOP, in my opinion, still is kind of the shortcut or the easiest way to get a lot of consistency out of your system. It has its limitations, but it works pretty good in my experience. So, I was trying RHOP with my closed barrel window, which is currently in there, with this Modify Sora RHOP bucking mount. So the interesting thing is inside this bucking, there's sort of these ridges and a gap here, which hopefully we can catch on camera. Yeah, you can just see it inside the bucking. And what happens by comparison, so remember, this is the bucking they shipped it with. Our BB, barely tap it and it drops through. Here we take BB, push it in, and it gets caught and retained perfectly by these two ridges. And it takes a little bit of force to knock it out of there. What is so great about this? This means when you're chambering your BB, it comes to a stop consistently at the same place every time. We have a nozzle that's spring-driven that applies a consistent amount of pressure, in theory, because it's a linear spring, every time. What does that mean? Your BB goes to the same spot before the air gets released. Now, how the nozzle seals with this bucking, or the bucking lips, I think there's a little bit more testing to do. We just had huge snowstorms by me, so I haven't been able to test this further, as well as because, as I mentioned, my bridged barrel means with our hop that my hop-up arm here can't really go down because it's hitting the bridge of the barrel. Why? Because our hop-up arm is aligned perfectly, exclusively to the back edge of the barrel, which is a little bit interesting. What I'll probably end up doing, if I can get the hop-up arm here to pop out, is adding a thin amount of sorbothane, or numb material, just to like half of it, or 3/4 of it. So it gives me essentially kind of a stepped effect, so it would only push down in front of that barrel window. But that said, I was able to apply some hop with this, even with the stock nub. It just ended up tilting a little bit in there, and really kind of wonky how much hop-up it was applying. Was performing really quite well. It's still not been nice enough out for me to really do any more testing or to get concise data, but the performance, particularly with this, and I'll show you here in a second the clips that I took, maybe I'll actually stop and edit them into here. But I observed with an endoscope, I was manually chambering BBs by basically powering up the engine with air. So nozzle comes back, unplugging it from air, nozzle will go forward, BB will get chambered, watching it from the perspective of inside the barrel and seeing what was happening to that BB, which is basically what brought me to all of these conclusions. And everything that I observed with this guy is the BB got caught just like it is here, perfectly. Go and push backwards on the BB, right, with the endoscope or with a rod, and there's no movement, meaning it was in contact with the nozzle of the gun, perfectly stopped here, and it's stopping before, my RHOP patch or before it come in contact with the mount, which is exactly what you would want. While our stock barrel setup, I say it feels funny calling it stock because it's a lambda barrel. The BB was getting partially placed under the mound already, which seems odd for a spring-driven system, but I think it's more so a function of the fact that there's nothing to slow down or resist or retain the BB on the way into chamber. Personally, I think this system, if it came with an AEG barrel and setup, out of the box, probably would have worked just fine. I feel like this addition of the gas blowback bucking in combination with our spring-driven nozzle is what helped create the issue that we have. All right. So here, I'm going to divert or take a detour to look at some of the endoscope footage, and I'll probably talk over that and explain all that. Hopefully I can edit it together decently. Okay, just wanted to go over a little bit of the testing procedure that I used to get a lot of the endoscope shots of inside the barrel while we were chambering. So I locked up the gun here in a soft jaw vise inverted. I held my endoscope at a fixed distance, just using this little jeweler's vise. I wrapped the endoscope in layers of just Scotch tape to build it out so that when I insert it into the barrel here, there's not any play. So it isn't like our camera shot is going to be at an angle somehow from it just sitting or bouncing around inside the barrel. and giving us a slightly weird view or an inconsistent view. So this combination of things allows me to place and repeatedly put the endoscope into the gun at the same orientation, at the same depth, that it should give me, in theory, the same or close to the same picture every time. How I was testing to the cycling is I noticed when you pressurize the system, the nozzle goes forward. No, wait. Pressurize the system, the nozzle goes back. When it's unpressurized, the nozzle is forward at rest because it's an open bolt system. So if you disconnect the air, the nozzle will shoot forward like it would normally do when chambering. So that's how I'm getting the...
All right, so here's the test that I ran looking at inside checking feeding. So this is our stock setup, Hopup dialed till it functions kind of, looking at both the short mag empty and the short mag with full capacity. We see the BB getting placed under the bucking mound. And with the R-hopped barrel here, with the Sora bucking, which I think that's the key part here, we see both cases. The BB gets caught and retained by those ridges in the bucking. It is not even touching the R-hop patch yet. So here we're looking at the effects of pushing on the mag or pushing or messing with the remote line here, and we can see this is the result of the engine moving. If you watch the R-hop patch move, it's because the whole engine unit is moving up and down in the gun. And here we are looking at our nozzle alignment in relation to the barrel. It's a bit of a crude measurement, just looking at and counting the pictures from a still, but multiple shots I took showed the same thing, that our nozzle is not aligned perfectly, and you can see this by the purple gapping around the barrel. And if you look at the lower left and the lower right, you can also see the bucking feed lip squish factor that I was talking about from the the hop up arm pushing down on the bucking.
So we're back. And now let's talk about a couple of the other problems or things. I don't know how big of problems they are, but I feel like things that would make the engine just, or the system, a lot better or take it to the next stage, so to speak. So, one is stability, and I showed you this just a second ago with the endoscope footage. Our whole engine and barrel system, it isn't retained down by anything. So if I just push up on our remote line here, the whole engine comes up and down. There is 0 screws, 0 pins, nothing locks the engine down to the lower frame, nothing locks the barrel down to the lower frame. The only thing that comes in contact with the barrel is the upper slide here. And as you've seen, when inserting a mag or applying a bit of pressure on a mag, we watched from inside the barrel how that is basically pushing on the engine and this assembly upward within the top slide, causing that grub screw to push down on our bucking mound and into the barrel. That means changing mags, bumping mags, or that because this system has play in it, means that you can add variation to that, as well as HPA engines are relatively low impact. They aren't a piston slamming around in there, but there's still moving parts. There's still that nozzle moving back and forth. There is vibrations. So I think having some way of positive engagement of the HPA engine to the lower frame would be a good thing to have. I would also say, looking at our slide here, we have an awful lot of meat vertically where our hop-up adjustment is. Take your hop-up adjustment and tie it to your lower or to our engine itself. I don't care if you want to keep using the TDC, you could easily make a little bump that sits on top of here that still, does your grub screw adjustment with your TDC, and then just cut out more of this opening. Right? Because my other thought is too, you shouldn't have to reset your hop up every time you need to open the gun up or you need to charge the gun. Either, if you're going to keep it in the top, I'd still say this bottom side should be stable. but you need to make it so you can charge the gun without opening it, or charge the battery without opening the gun up. Because resetting your hop up all the time is, I think, a poor design choice, or being forced to. The other thing, while we're talking about stability, I know already too that I talked about this, or it's already being addressed, but this guy, our little collar here, spacer for the barrel, it's super short. So our barrel, this basically takes up the difference between the size of the bucking and the size of the barrel in the hop-up unit. But in part because this is shorter, if we look, it's plenty easy to wiggle our barrel around here. We try plant it on the ground. Right? Same thing up and down. Little things like that are great ways to add variance into your system. Personally, I don't know if there's enough space to it, but I would have liked to have seen is positive engagement between the engine and the lower frame, and between the front of the barrel and the lower frame. This upper slide really shouldn't matter at all to the engine and barrel setup of this. If these are all fully bedded to our lower, you won't get any variance from here. The other thing that I noticed too is alignment-wise, when looking through the barrel, and I showed you this as well, is our alignment is good, but it's not perfect. And what that means is, I don't know, it might be visible here, or it might just be some of the camera view angles. Our barrel axis vertically seems off. And it's either that it's sitting too low or too high, or maybe, a function of just how the engine is retained by being squished together in here. So correcting that would be a good thing. Bedding down the engine or keeping the engine from going up and down would be a good thing. I mean, you could even potentially do something back here or in the back of the tail, into the bottom of this guy. Potentially a through pin near the trigger area. That could also work. But yeah, I would also be very curious to see if you had done any test, if this is the Gate, if they had done any testing with an AEG style barrel. I guess the other thing is too is that's potentially a little bit longer system, right? It's a longer bucking. It takes up a little bit more space, but I feel like it could still easily fit within this inch and a half, about inch and a half length here. Stability, I think those are the big things. I mean, heck, even too, if you made this piece longer, you could easily retain it with a grub screw or something rather than our O-rings here. Just a small grub screw from through the side. Not necessarily necessary, but like I said, I feel like every little thing can help. Design-wise, so barrel hop-up, we talked about engine adjust, or our hop-up adjustment should be tied to our engine and or the lower, not the upper. Those two systems should be separate. Personally, I would like to see it if this hop-up arm was moved a little bit more forward, so you could use a closed barrel or a closed window barrel if you had wanted to. And or two, it might potentially help with some of the squishing the feed lip effect that you get by adjusting it, just because it sits so far back. And reviewing the alignment checks vertically, like I said, I feel like our barrel is being canted, I think, upward a little bit based on the pictures they took from inside the barrel with everything closed up and hop-up adjusted. Performance-wise, it needs to shoot consistent. Currently it isn't. I believe with this setup and or some monkeying around with arms, particularly with the modify bucking and its retaining ridges, I believe I can get good performance out of it in its current setup, and I'm very highly optimistic about that. I think the other thing to talk about or look at is the mag consistency. A lot of people have mixed consistency throughout the mags. I haven't done as extreme of testing or as extreme of usage of break-in and checking these against each other. However, I did test, with my bucking, or with my new bucking and barrel, I did test chambering effectiveness when the mag is completely full versus when the mag is completely empty or near empty, and I was getting consistent chamber position using the modify Sora R hop or flat hop bucking. So I think in that regard, some of the mag pressure variance, so that your feed stack is one thing, and then the pressure moving it forward or to knock that top BB out of the stack, that impacts how much the nozzle slows down or gets impacted. And I think that compounds with our complexity of how and where the BB gets chambered in here when you don't have something like what this bucking has to catch and stop the BB at the right spot every time. That's just the theory. I'm not 100% certain on that one. Okay. But mags might be another thing to look at. Now to talk about just some general design things or a couple design notes that I think would be good improvements. I was kind of wondering, so looking at the RMR or holes of, it's quite close to the width. I'm just kind of wondering design-wise, like, couldn't you have adjusted the taper here or the taper on the back just so you could, tap the slide itself directly, especially when your only mount is only size for RMRs, and it's not size for all RMRs because these little pins, at least on my Chinese knockoff RMR, don't fit it. So I'll either have to do some adjustments on the bottom of here or knock these pegs off. It's just kind of interesting or curious there. Not hating on that or this, by the way. I mean, it could easily be the Chinese thing. Sights. So I think the sights would be, or it would be a nice, or it would be an improvement in my opinion, if you used standardized sights. So think like Glock, think high Kappa, standard platform, dovetail, set screw combination, where you can put on whatever the heck you want. Right now we're locked in with this weird hole setup and these dimples. Right? No options for fibers, outside of maybe kind of the front. Fibers, tritium, high profile suppressor sights, all those, you could just use off-the-shelf parts or allow people to use off-the-shelf parts if they wanted to go a different direction. Not a huge thing, and I know that technically adds complexity because there's more pieces, or you're cutting a dovetail in some cases, but it's a thought that I would give you for consideration. Already kind of talked about the battery bit. It'd be nice to not have to pull the entire engine out. So if you needed to swap the battery, you'd have to take it down like this, pop the engine out, like unwind your battery and pull it off. Put your other one on, rewind it up, re-push the engine back down. Right? And once again too, like, I know there's some limitations just due to size constraints, and I understand and respect that, but I feel like overall design of the gun and or space, once again too, there's a lot of meat up on the top of the slide. It could have been done a bit better, or have a way of opening the bottom or the side or something. So once again, you didn't have to disturb your barrel, your hop up, your engine, all those things just to change your battery or charge your battery. I was also thinking that I was curious, mine shipped or arrived with the battery plugged in. I know you've done a lot in terms of sleep settings, but imagine if these units are going to stores where they might sit on a shelf or on a boat to get there and then on a shelf for a while or on display for a while. Your battery's plugged in and it's sleeping, I know, and it's rated for however many months. But that's going to drain the battery eventually. That seems kind of silly to me. But that's just me. Under the same point of if you want to store it for the season, you have to pull out the engine essentially to get the battery out. I guess you don't if you just unplug it. Last thing, probably worth bringing up, is selector ergonomics. I know there's some limitations just with how you're using the Aster in the system and to where those sensors land in relation to everything else, but I said having to sort of kick your hand out in order to reach. You can kind of put it on safe without doing anything, but taking it off of safe is definitely a bit of an awkward reach around. Nice to have, as well as it'd be nice if there was better indication as to, your fire mode. But once again, in my opinion, that's a small qualm. Really what we need is get the accuracy manageable. And in my opinion, I think keeping the spring-driven nozzle might be a good thing. I know from what I've heard, the new version will be a pneumatic-driven nozzle, which has me a little bit worried because, as aforementioned, those are going to vary based on your input pressures. Different people using different stuff. If you go to a different field, adjust your pressure. That's going to mess with your chambering force, potentially want a different bunking or something like that. It's just you have a moving variable to solve for versus a fixed variable to solve for, I think is silly. The other thing that I've noticed and other people have noticed is this thing is highly air inefficient, which is very confusing to me because, we're powering a very small barrel. I'm less privy on the full inner details of how this engine works, but it's surprising. It's just all. I know sometimes you have to use a little bit more energy to accelerate a BB over a shorter distance, but still, like, how fast it burns through air is kind of ridiculous compared to, some of my other setups. I mean, even I think it's been worse than other single solenoid engines that I've used or interacted with. Certainly, my dual solenoid engine in my DMR, incredibly efficient by comparison, but I just wasn't expecting it to be this air hungry. And I have less comments on if that's possible with just the setup, or if there may be some options there. I might play around with spacers, or messing around with the volume inside the unit might be a way to play with that some, but we'll see. So overall, that's my summary. I know I listed a whole bunch of things. Gate, I hope you listen or watch this. I know I probably got long-winded and went into way too much detail on a couple of things, but I feel like especially the endoscope shots and everything really back up what I'm saying and what I'm looking at here, and some of these issues that I brought up. Hopefully some of these can be worked into either the upgrade kit or potentially future revision or future release of the gun. Like I said, I feel like you have a great potential of this product, but it was just released a little bit too early or before doing enough testing or validating or working with other people. I understand it's really kind of your first ground up gun, and I think it's got very good bones. It's just we aren't there yet. And I can't wait to see where this goes and what this becomes. Please keep on interacting with your community, the Discord and all other groups. Give us updates, and most importantly, I would reiterate or say, I feel like we're all willing to wait and willing for you to take the extra time to actually make it right. So sending out constant updates or like a V2 kit and then a V3 kit, I would rather wait, spend extra months, come out with the proper upgrade kit so that this can function to its full potential. So thanks everyone for watching. I'm sorry this got into a bit of a tirade or detailed ramble, but hopefully some of you that are also struggling with it find this information helpful or may help you in your search for the perfect bucking or troubleshooting some of the issues you may have as well.